why don't you guys all get together and hang out with each other? When they literally built their brand on not having emotions.
Maybe the male loneliness epidemic should try volunteering.
These are women's most insane responses to the male loneliness epidemic. This lady is about to do a jump scare on us. Let's see what she has to say.
Wait, I'm so confused. If the male loneliness epidemic is a thing, then why don't you guys all get together and hang out with each other? Like, you could form a support group of all the lonely males in your area and then maybe meet up once a week or twice a month and you guys all go out to lunch together and you become besties. Or like, maybe you could post something on Meetup where you put it out to all the lonely males in your city and then you guys all plan a day together where you go play golf or go to the shooting range or play video games, whatever it is you guys like to do together. And then you wouldn't be lonely anymore and you would have a bunch of new friends.
Is it just me, or does this sound extremely sarcastic?
And maybe you guys could all get each other's phone numbers and start a group chat where you could just go to each other if you need some support, or some help with something. You could even go to each other if you need help moving or a ride to the airport, or maybe you're just going through a bad breakup and you just need that solid group of guy friends that makes you feel good about yourself. And then you wouldn't feel bad anymore. You wouldn't be lonely. Oh my God, you would be so much happier. How come you guys don't do that? Do you not like hanging out with other lonely males? Do you not like hanging out with other males?
This is so creepy. It's like she is triggered by the fact that there is attention to this epidemic, or she is just angry at the fact that men are lonely. So I read that 10% of females experience loneliness, whereas 15% of males experience loneliness. So it almost makes me think that she is angry that there's not more attention to women's loneliness, or that there's not more focus on everybody being lonely. I don't know. Why is she so triggered about this? That's what I'm confused about. This girl really commented, they want us to organize it. And another person, Violet, says, and smile more. So you're more approachable for each other. So they know you all are friendly. Honestly, it just makes me think that it has become so normalized for women to hate men that they are happy to see males struggling. I guess that some women think that men are trying to make it their responsibility to fix their loneliness. This girl says, right, like join a club, get a hobby, build community. This has nothing to do with us. Yes, it does, because loneliness is something that has been plaguing both males and females. Humans just don't even interact in person anymore. And so I don't know why women are being like, oh, we're not a part of the human race. We're not a part of that. That's a guy thing. No, it's not. And we should be concerned about it because it affects us too. This girl says, me whenever someone brings up the male loneliness epidemic.
Clap if you care. All right, let's move on.
I mean, you literally have a fake audience clapping.
You care.
You have a fake audience clapping because there's no real humans that are clapping for you and they're digitally liking your video. But hey, maybe I'm just not getting it and this girl can explain it to me.
Maybe the male loneliness epidemic should smile more. Maybe the male loneliness epidemic should try volunteering. Ooh, or a cooking class? I think the male loneliness epidemic is going to find somebody when they least expect it.
Okay, so far what I got from this is, okay, it's actually a problem. Imagine you're a stay-at-home mom and you just don't talk to anybody because you're just at home taking care of the kids all days and you have no adult interactions. Meanwhile, the husband, he goes to work, he sees all of his coworkers and it seems like he has a lot of buddies. And then maybe imagine that one day this woman was like, oh, I don't know what to do. And he's like, well, why don't you just join a cooking class? And so what I'm getting from her tone in her sass is basically that she's trying to throw it back at the men. You want us to have sympathy for you, but you never had sympathy for us. That's kind of what I'm getting. And honestly, guys, revenge is the most destructive emotion out there. So maybe if either men or women could be more sympathetic to each other, this wouldn't be such a big problem.
The male loneliness epidemic has ever tried dating apps? I have a friend who met somebody that way. They should try dating apps. Try dating apps. The male loneliness epidemic is alone because they clearly haven't worked on themselves. They don't love themselves enough. That's why they're still single. The male loneliness epidemic does not love themselves enough, and they're never going to find somebody until they love themselves. Maybe the male loneliness epidemic should try taking a new profile photo. Ooh, or run club? I mean, the male loneliness epidemic really needs to take a hard look at itself. What is the common denominator in all of the male loneliness epidemic's failed relationships? The male loneliness epidemic. I mean, how is the male loneliness epidemic even trying to meet someone? They're never going to meet anyone in their living room. The male loneliness epidemic is trying too hard and they're coming across as desperate. They're never going to find anybody that way. The male loneliness epidemic needs to put themselves out there. That's why they're not finding anybody. They're not putting themselves out there. The male loneliness epidemic.
It is so hard to tell if she is being sarcastic or if she actually believes that this is good advice. It seems so passive aggressive. Like if I was to make one of these TikTok videos and speak on the male loneliness epidemic, I would probably just say something like, if you matter to someone, then you matter. You're not as lonely as you think. There's people who love you. If you think you're alone, just know that you are not alone. And that's what I would say. But this girl, she's like, men are lonely because they suck. And she's like, they don't have any friends because nobody likes them. And no one will ever love them because they don't even love themselves. Whoa, this is kind of really going a little bit far. But yeah, people are commenting on it. The male loneliness epidemic is just being too picky. What are you talking about? And I think people are confusing the fact of single men who want to find someone to date versus men who just maybe don't have like a guys group, like a guys friend group. And I think the rise in gaming just kind of proves that, because it almost seems like a lot of men now have their strongest friendships with people online on the internet. And I mean, so does everybody. And I don't know why they're making this like so exclusively to men if only 5% more of men are lonely like women. So I think these videos are just of women being like, we're also lonely too. The male loneliness epidemic should lower their standards. The male loneliness epidemic should ask their married friends to set them up. Has the male loneliness epidemic asked their friends if they know anyone who's single? I'm happy you didn't say therapy because socializing adult men is almost impossible and us therapists are exhausted. I almost feel like this is so backwards because in my own personal life experiences, it seems like males are able to hold friendships better and longer, so much better than females are. I don't know. I'm confused by the male loneliness epidemic still. Men deserve the male loneliness epidemic? What?
I have a hot take when it comes to male loneliness epidemic. In my humble opinion, I think men deserve it. You actually start with the 4B movement, which, you know what, honestly, when it comes to the 4B movement, they gotta have the world tour because we need it here in the Philippines because men here are fucking horrible. Literally, the 4B movement is happening in South Korea and men have the audacity to say that, oh, women are useless. But yeah, guess what? Your race is literally dying. So because women are not willing to participate with your patriarchy, babes. I swear to God, the only response that men have because they're so stupid and the only response that they can do is violence. Because as I'm filming this, there's reports in New York City that there are men who are literally punching women out of nowhere.
Yeah, some crazy, insane, like homeless person goes on a crazy tangent and she's like, oh yes, all men suck. F the patriarchy. What?
Response to the 4B movement and feminism. Because again, when it comes to taking accountability, they don't have that. They don't take accountability with things. They just have the audacity. When you think about it, the 4B movement, it's just the consequences of their own horrible actions. I said it once and I'll say it again, men are the most violent type of people in the world. And whenever you try to leave a man or you try to not entertain a man, they're always gonna say, who's gonna protect you? I'm not gonna protect you. I'm not gonna protect.
Okay, I mean, sure, whatever. She can have her own opinions. The thing that I just don't understand, and I think that is kind of messed up, is when they put these blanket or umbrella terminologies on all men being exactly the same and saying that all men deserve this. All men are violent. All men have called women useless and they're just such horrible people. And it's like, that's not true. But yeah, I think that the normalization of people thinking that all men are innately bad is a huge part of the problem, right? And I feel like instead of looking at people like either men or women, that we should just think, oh, you know, if another fellow human being is struggling, then you would want the best for them. You would want to help them out, not just be like, oh, well, men suck, so they deserve it. I mean, we want the human race to thrive, everybody. If half of the population is struggling, do you really think that that's not going to affect you? Especially when men are the ones who basically do everything in society.
Do you ever think about like the recent propaganda with men, like the male loneliness epidemic and like all this stuff, when they literally built their brand on not having emotions? They literally built it on that.
Their
Which is
brand?
stupid as hell, and like we could go into why and all the philosophical reasons why. But like then you expect me to feel bad for you when that's something you could easily switch. Like just be a nice person, just respect other people.
What?
You're not fighting against a system of oppression, right? Unless it's like intersectional. Then okay, fair. But still, even within that, you could be a better person. And it's like being emotional is our brand. You criticize us for it forever. You're still criticizing us for it. And then yet you're begging us to pay attention to your emotions. Like, bitch, you don't even make any sense. Which is another tenet of your brand, that you're logical.
You're
brand.
Not even logical. Stop saying that it's a part of their brand. What are you even talking about? And a big part of this that I see as the problem is simply that people really struggle to accept the differences between men and women. If a lot of women say that men are just not as emotionally in tune. Okay, so even if somehow there was a fact of that, and we could say that that was certain, then maybe just accept that and move on and just recognize that it is a part of their nature. The same way that men can accept the fact that women are more emotional and we talk a lot more than men do. That's actually a fact. So these are things that we can just come to terms with and we can be okay with it. And then when a problem arises, we wouldn't have to blame something that is just innate in the other gender because we would have already accepted that. But these are people who are just unaccepting to male nature, and they just want to say that men are just innately bad. Male loneliness epidemic, but when I'm trying to crack all of them to cure it, now I'm a bop. Okay, and I'm glad that she brought this up because I personally was thinking that maybe a big part of the male loneliness epidemic, for all of the loneliness epidemic, men and women, is our tendency to be on social media, and we're constantly looking at people who have no relation to our real life. It's almost like we spend more time with influencers than we do with our actual family. And when it comes to men, not all men, but a lot of men, they are addicted to things like corn, and then it makes it more difficult for them to be able to interact with females in real life. And so, this girl to me is a big part of the problem. So this woman here says, do men realize they can end the male loneliness epidemic by just being better friends to one another? It's really that simple. And she almost has a point. There's this book by Dale Carnegie that is called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it says that a lot of people go out into the world trying to make friends instead of having the intention to be a good friend. I understand what she's saying, but she's also trying to make it seem like she has it all figured out. And I think maybe a lot of the women who are upset about the male loneliness epidemic are so upset because they are also really lonely. And we should be okay with the fact that loneliness is experienced differently for men than it is for women because we are different. And we should focus more on the things that we can relate to each other on instead of focusing on the differences. I think that would help to bring humanity together. So here is a guy. Thankfully, we're going to listen to a guy. We're finally going to get a logical explanation on this. Okay, so this guy says loneliness in men.
If it's a Saturday night and I'm home on my own and it's 6 o'clock, my mates are married with kids, my friends are haven't contacted me, that's where I'll get that itch to right, well, I've got to be social. It's a Saturday night. I'm only this age once in my life. I don't want to waste this night. So I'll start having a drink and just find out who's doing something. That's my biggest trigger is loneliness for sure. I just don't like wasting. I'm not even my youth anymore, but in 3 years' time, I'll look back and go, man, you were only 37. Why did you punish yourself or sacrifice a time going out where it could have been could have had heaps of fun? Last week was an example. I'd done 2.5 weeks off the piss. 5 of my mates 4 of them have got kids and wives that never go out. And I was like, fuck, man, like, am I going to sacrifice a good time and catching up with the boys because I've told myself that I don't want to drink for 3 weeks? Or am I just going to go and enjoy the time with my friends? And I was like, well, I'm just going to go and enjoy the time with my friends. But I don't know why I can't do that. I can't do it sober. I just don't enjoy it.
Oh, that's too bad. And I think that a lot of people can relate to this. It's almost like when you're in a situation where everybody is drinking, it makes them more social, or they say like, oh, you know, I just want to have fun, or it brings out my character and stuff. It's almost like relying on alcohol to make you social, to stop the loneliness, is going to make you more lonely. Because when you're drunk, when people drink, they do things that they wouldn't normally do. And so people are getting to know this different side of you. Oh, they're wild, they're fun, they're so cool, and they always say funny stuff. But it's like, yeah, they only say funny stuff when they're drunk. And people need to recognize that you can be just as social, you can have even more fun without drinking, and then the next day you're also going to feel so much better and you'll be able to have a normal, productive life, which is going to help you have connections. And in watching this video, I felt related to it, and I think that a lot of the women can relate to the male loneliness epidemic. I was watching a video from Mel Gibson where she was explaining that it's difficult to get older in a sense and to go through your 20s and stuff, because in high school or in college even, your friends were just put next to you. It's kind of like you were categorized into groups. You were told who to be social with. It was always like, oh, okay, you're a part of the volleyball team. Here's your volleyball friends. You guys are friends now. And so it's like you were always put in places where you would have friends. But then after you graduate, as this guy was explaining in his video, oh, my friends have wives, so they already have their families. Everybody is going through different transitions in their life. You see on your phone that the people that you went to school with, some of them are traveling now. Some of them have just jobs. Some of them have kids. It's like everybody is at a different point in their life. And what Mel Gibson explained in her video was that when you become an adult, it becomes your responsibility to make friends. And maybe a lot of people, like, we don't realize that. It's like no one else is going to do it for us at this point. It's not like we belong to little groups like we used to, that we have to try. We have to put ourselves into places where we can meet people with similar interests. And a lot of everything that we do is online now. And so that can be difficult when we are grouped in these similar interests online instead of in person. And so I don't think that this is as much of a male problem as it is a people problem. This guy says the male loneliness epidemic isn't about being single, it's about being friendless. Men don't need a girlfriend to feel whole, they need a brotherhood, a tribe. No amount of dating will fix what's missing when there's no one to call bro. That's really kind of sad. Because I mean, I think that there's also kind of a FOMO feeling, like fear of missing out, because online, it seems like all guys, like they have like these big friend groups, like Logan Paul, and they have their silly groups and they do funny things together. And so it's like, oh, guys are so social, they're so silly, like they can just get along with anybody. And I think maybe a lot of guys see that too, and they're like, oh, well, why don't I have that lifestyle? But the thing is another thing about being on social media all the time is a lot of the stuff that we see is fake and it's fabricated. And so I think that it's more normal to It's normal to be lonely sometimes. I think that people post when they're out with their friends, but most of the time they don't post like, oh, just sitting at home alone. And so we just get a compilation of a bunch of people out partying, and we don't realize that a lot of other people are just kind of like homebodies and they don't go out that much either. And that is okay. It is okay to focus on certain things in your life and not always have to feel like you need a big group of friends who's always going out and having fun or going on vacations and all of this stuff together. I mean, it's more realistic to just like be a normal person. This guy posted first time buying groceries after the breakup. Oh man. It's actually crazy because, I mean, it's so different to go with living with somebody and then not being with someone and like the silence and not having anyone to speak to. I mean, loneliness is difficult. Here we have a guy who is going to explain what it's like to be lonely.
You're lonely, aren't you?
A little bit.
That's okay. What have you discovered about being alone? seek deep inside of you. What have you found about being alone?
It's peaceful.
Peaceful. Meditative. So really you don't need a girlfriend. You're okay alone.
So, I mean, this guy has basically accepted the fact that he is alone and that he will apparently, I guess, continue to be alone. I mean, when you think about it on the scale of things, nobody truly is alone. I mean, unless you live like in the middle of Alaska, we're constantly surrounded by people. If you feel alone, you can just like go to the park and then you'll immediately just feel excited because like you're around people, you know? This guy says men offer nothing but expect 10 out of 10 women are a big reason behind the loneliness epidemic. I mean, we could constantly look for reasons why men are lonely. But again, this is a problem that all of humanity is facing. I mean, if you really want to talk about loneliness, I've lived abroad by myself, not speaking the language, no family, no friends, 0 connections, and just trying to figure it out. And then also realizing that people outside of America aren't like Americans and they're just like, oh, I love your shoes. How are you today? How's the weather? I mean, they don't just talk to strangers as much. And so I've learned like the biggest way to cope with feeling sad or feeling like no one gets you is to just have a goal in mind, focus on it, and think about it 24/7. I mean, you wouldn't even have time to feel lonely if your purpose is so strong and you're so driven towards working to something that I mean, people just begin to appear that also have similar goals, you know? And so if you find something that is so deep within you that you care about and you could work towards every single day, like you wouldn't even have the time to be lonely, you know? And so I think that we just need to be more purpose driven and figure out what our purpose is in life and never cease to work towards it. Because when you're doing that, you're not going to be lonely because you're constantly going to be like busy in a sense. And I guess that being busy could be trying to just cover up the real problem, but actually I think that it fixes it because when you are busy and you're working towards something, you're constantly going to find people with similar goals. And I do think that one of the biggest differences between loneliness amongst men and women is that women are just kind of ruthless to the guys. They're like, oh, you're lonely? That sucks for you. But if women are like, oh, we're feeling lonely, they're like, oh, we're here for you. We're here to help you. What do we need? How can we make this better? And so I don't understand why the women are being kind of like ruthless to the guys when a lot of the times guys are actually really caring towards the women because they want to be needed. They want their help. But women are just like, oh, sucks for you. Deal with it. And so that's why people post things like this that says there is a male loneliness epidemic. And then what are the guys going to do about it? Because the women are just like, well, screw you. That's your own fault. They're going to thug that stuff out. That's so funny. I mean, guys, they just have to deal with some stuff on their own. Whereas women, we have to have community. Like if we have a problem, we have to talk about it in order to understand it. But guys, they isolate, and that's how they come to the answers. This guy says, POV, your boy is complaining that he's single and lonely, but he's a loner, antisocial, hard-working, introverted, gym rat homeboy whose only real personality trait is that he likes cars. I mean, he's not actually lonely then. I mean, if he's hardworking and he's a gym rat and he's just like a focused person, that's fine. After seeing so many of these videos, I almost get the feeling that a lot of people think that loneliness is bad and it should just be avoided. And they're maybe forgetting that loneliness can be something good. It can help people focus and help people progress in their life. And I think that there's such a big pressure to join a sorority and go to all these parties and post about how much fun you're having instead of just focusing and doing something worthwhile and meaningful. So let's be okay with having some alone time, some time to recollect our thoughts. Those are good. And also understand that it is important that we socialize because we are social beings. So, I mean, there's really just a balance, but don't feel pressured to try to fit in and have the guys group and be a Jake Pauler and stuff. I mean, it is okay to not join a certain crowd all the time. Thank you guys for watching. Please triple check that you're subscribed to my channel and I'll see you next time. Bye.